Hello, this is DC Hammer, and this is the DC Hammers Show. Leftists in the United States, and especially those that are so committed to the greening of the planet and the protection of the animals therein, people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I don't understand why they concentrate on activities within the United States that are typically protective of the environment and our creatures, when over in China they seem to have a completely different approach when it comes to the environment and the creatures of the world. As indicated yesterday, China, the Red Dragon, the Communist Chinese, tend to be some of the biggest polluters on the planet. But in addition to that, they also then don't really believe in the rights of those critters that the left is so committed to. And even though most people have a tendency to be soft-hearted towards animals, I put myself in that category as well, you would think that the efforts of PETA and other organizations would be focused on the people that truly cause the greatest harm on this planet towards our furry friends. For example, this story coming to us from ChineseNews.net, the Chinese Ivory Queen has been sentenced to 15 years in prison in Tanzania, this is in Africa, for what she has done to poach the tusks of African elephants for many years, and in the most recent case, she was convicted of smuggling 700 elephant tusks, so 350 elephants died in order to produce that load of tusks, and she has been brought to justice, and she will be serving time for the mass killing of elephants as they try to supply the illegal markets, and they say including in China, but China is one of the mass markets for material of this kind, of body parts of exotic animals. And in Tanzania alone, as this article declares, that the elephant population has declined by 60% between 2009 and 2014. Where are the activists? This report from the Daily Signal indicates that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is continuing his tough love diplomacy tour in Europe. Secretary of State Pompeo held a press conference with Polish Foreign Minister Jacek Japurowiec to indicate the United States is reversing that benign neglect syndrome that was created when the administration of Barack Hussein Obama decided to bow low to the dictators and follow instead of lead. Well, we are definitely leading now, and Mike Pompeo is reestablishing relationships with our partners in Central Europe, pressing Europeans to stop doing business with Iran, and warning about the influence of Russia. Yes, you heard that. Warning against the influence of Russia and China, the Red Dragon. Unfortunately, Breitbart is reporting that in 5 different German cities on the same day, there were stabbing attacks by Muslim Islamic invaders. And naturally, the German authorities are very slow in bringing out details, especially when it involves people that have immigrated illegally or even allowed to enter by Merkel and her government lowering the drawbridge and allowing people to stream in from the Middle East and North Africa. So there were attacks that started in Cologne, Germany at 4:40 a.m. on Sunday. Another attack in Lingen in Lower Saxony later that same day. An attack in Nuremberg. A man of Arabic background, quote-unquote, is wanted by the police for the stabbing in Mulheim. And there was a knife attack in Frankfurt. And all of this comes just 2 months after 3 women were stabbed in Nuremberg, and just over a month after an Afghan immigrant, stabbed a pregnant 25-year-old Polish woman, killing her and her unborn child in the process. But I guess to the left, that second life wouldn't be as significant to them as in this country now in New York, we are legalizing infanticide. And finally in Europe, the New American is reporting that Hungary has launched a new ad campaign that is aimed at our best friend George Soros and the European Union immigration policies. So the government of Hungary is poking billionaire globalist George Soros in the eye and the EU at the same time with an ad blitz demanding the right of the people to know what's going on in Brussels and to reverse this tendency in order to allow migrants from the Middle East and North Africa to continue to stream into Europe. And as Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has continued to refuse to allow German Chancellor Angela Merkel and her open borders policy to compel him to follow in the same suicidal path as the German government has gone down, and is continuing to resist with a border wall, fencing with razor wire, and a variety of other barriers in order to keep the horde out. This article comes from the Epoch Times, and it's interesting if you watched President Trump's speech before the gathering of Venezuelan Americans down in Miami the other day. He was roundly cheered by the audience for his stance on what's happening down in Venezuela, his continued sending of humanitarian supplies to get to the Venezuelans if they can get through the communist regime to actually the people. And Venezuelans that are now fleeing that country are saying that socialism is not the answer, and the speeches that President Trump is giving that fly in the face of socialism is one of the only things that is giving them hope. Many of the Venezuelan refugees are fleeing to Colombia, other areas in Colombia, as that is a nearby country to Venezuela on the northern coast of South America. And millions are in flux as that entire country, Venezuela, has collapsed after it was the richest nation in South America. As long as it was free, they're rich in oil resources. And after the communist government swept into power and took over, that by Hugo Chavez, took over those private concerns, imposed government control, socialism, communism over everything. And since then, the entire country, in the decades since, has plummeted into starvation and poverty. But as one of those Venezuelans who is dramatically affected by this downturn in the country due to the communist government of Venezuela says, I feel hopeful because having the U.S. government support is very important to us. It helped us to be in the eye of the world. Socialism needs to be eliminated from the Americas. I'm a Juan Guaido supporter, and I'm a supporter of democracy and freedom. I think corruption and socialism crippled Venezuela. So there you hear it from the mouth of a person that suffered through socialism directly, contrary to the teaching that's going on in American universities, in which socialism is touted as the solution to all the world's ills. People that have actually suffered through it have a completely different opinion about the negative consequences of socialism and communism when private property rights and the government intrusion into all aspects of your life guarantees the people will be drained of their resources, the leadership will become rich as the people become poor. But don't tell that to Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And at first I was skeptical of this new Space Force initiative that President Trump has been touting. This comes to us from the Free Beacon. And I've changed my opinion after, especially since I trust Bill Gertz implicitly, and his reporting now that it appears that the underlying reason for the Space Force initiative from President Trump is in order to fight back against the possible threat of space weapons, anti-satellite weaponry being used by the Chinese, the Red Dragon, the Communist Chinese, and the Russians. Yeah, that's the Russians, those Russians that we're supposed to be in bed with, that President Trump and Putin are supposed to be out playing golf at Mar-a-Lago together. And so, as President Trump is stating that America must be fully equipped to defend our vital interests, and our adversaries are training forces and developing technology to undermine our security in space, and they're working very hard at that, this article by Bill Gertz outlines the need for us, through this new Space Force initiative, to do whatever we can in order to protect our satellites, our assets in space, which also then enable us to protect our people and assets on the ground. Of course, this is going to require approval of Congress to put through the spending to support this initiative, and it'll be interesting to see how the leftists respond to the need for us to protect ourselves from above, as well as through incursion from the southern border. So last week, Beto was imploring the president to tear down those walls, and now apparently he's already, within a week, backing up on that position. So we don't know what his position will be later on as he heads towards his desire to be the Democrat nominee for president in 2020. But within a week, he has flipped from tear down the walls to, well, maybe we shouldn't tear them down. Maybe we should have barriers. But he just doesn't want them to be called walls. I don't care whether you call them a physical barrier, a wall, a fence. I don't care what it's called. You want to put up a moat, you want to put alligators in it. Doesn't matter to me, just as long as we're protected from the hordes of illegal aliens and criminals streaming in from our southern border. There is positive news on the trade front with China. This comes to us from Zero Hedge. China is proposing to buy another $30 billion with a B dollars in American agricultural products. And even though the Marxist screaming media would have you believe that we're making no progress in our talks with China on a variety of trade issues, it appears that outside of the actual trade negotiations, the communist Chinese, the Red Dragon, is still in need of a lot of our agricultural products. Their demand is increasing and their buying is increasing. So according to Bloomberg, China is proposing to buy an additional $30 billion of soybeans, corn, and wheat as part of the trade pact. And as the so-called trade war continues, with President Trump valiantly trying to level the playing field between the communist Chinese, the Red Dragon, and the United States, and as we'll continue to hear from the Marxist screaming media, all of the downsides of doing that, he continues to succeed. And typically, as Dr. Jerome Corsi has often said, President Trump always looks like he's going to lose right before he wins. So prepare yourself for another win. And just to prove those people that say that no matter what President Trump does, the left will, number one, oppose it, and number two, deny any success he's had. For example, claims have been made that if he cured cancer, they would make the claim that he didn't cure it fast enough. And this comes from the Washington Examiner, with now Democrats are saying that even though Trump's job growth miracle, remember now, he used the magic wand his predecessor, Barack Hussein Obama, had locked up in the safe in the White House, pulled it out, used the magic wand, the jobs are coming back. But according to the Democrats, that isn't enough, because we need to have, as they demand, a moral economy. Somebody please define that to me. You mean moral like in socialism or communism? That kind of a moral economy that steals the riches from the people that actually do the work and put in the sweat equity, and then absorb those funds up to government level agencies and the leader himself or herself, who then send it off to those private bank accounts in Switzerland? Oh, that kind of moral economy. And our hero Bernie Sanders is running for the Democrat presidential nomination again. Of course, Hillary Clinton also indicated she'd be in there. So if I were Bernie, I'd watch my back. I would be very careful when out in public. I'd have my security detail ready. I would be sure that if I'm flying in a plane, that I either have my parachute on at all times and stay fastened with your seatbelt. You don't know. It's going to be a bumpy ride. And of course, it's not just Bernie Sanders making statements such as we need to change our economy. I thought we already went through that hope and change thing. I don't think it worked out very well, but thankfully in the last 2 years we've had America being made great again. And a comment from former Vice President Joe Biden, what happened to a moral responsibility to a moral capitalism? What's interesting is during the Obama administration, with almost $1 trillion being spent through bailouts and investments in green energy, if the new Green Deal people are once again ignorant of the facts, the historical facts, at the beginning of the Barack Hussein Obama regime, they doled out millions and millions of taxpayer dollars for green initiatives, such as Solyndra, which was supposed to then become a booming business in the solar market, quickly collapsed, completely failed. And nobody in the Marxist screaming media is going to tell you the facts about that. So once again, the Democrats want us to go down the same path toward failed policies, thrown away taxpayer money, and conversion of our capitalist successful economy into a potentially failed socialist and communist economy due to old dinosaurs like red-faced Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, who just can't get enough of dragging down the American dream. And Q-Team has tipped us off that today is going to be an important day as far as revelations go. And it's interesting that Q-Team is drawing to people's attention issues involving the SCIF. And as you can see from this Wikipedia article, the SCIF is a sensitive, compartmented information facility used by top-ranking officials when they need to have meetings without the possibility of being overheard by eavesdroppers. So Q is telling us to think of the questions involved in a SCIF event. Who's able to participate? Is there record keeping for who's involved in the meetings? Whose ability to enter and leave? Can they do so with or without a paper trail? And I would think that the reason that this is being brought up, it comes clearer as you go down through the article. The reference to Hussein, as in Barack Hussein Obama, USSS means the United States Secret Service. His code name was Renegade. And as them bringing up that the definition itself of a renegade is someone who deserts and betrays an organization, country, or set of principles. And the synonyms for that are traitor, defector, deserter, turncoat, or betrayer. And since that was the moniker the Secret Service chose to give the former president, which is very interesting, and with Q then talking above that definition about the issues involved, activity related to a SCIF, wouldn't it be interesting if there's something that Q-Team knows, the President of the United States knows, Donald Trump, that would come out soon that will create an issue as far as the conduct within the SCIFs during the previous administration, and maybe even lead up to the top dog? What do you think? Thank you for listening, and God bless. And now the DC Hammer Show is available as an audio podcast. Just go to Podcast Garden or iTunes and search for DC Hammer or News Network Analysis Associates, NNAA.